Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today on the Divine Messages podcast. My name is Karina, and I am a psychic medium out of Calgary, Alberta. Back in February, I did an episode called A Fun Chat with a Friend. My girlfriend Angela and I talked about her husband booking an all men's group reading. Now, if you did listen to that episode, you would remember how terrified I was to work with a group of men. When I first started working as a healer, I was sent a few random men to help, but each time I would do a session with a man, I found myself extremely uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable for my entire life because I was hurt by so many men over and over, even since I was a young child. And I remember telling my spirit guides that I only wanted to work with women. And so for the last 8 years, 95% of my clients were female. The only men that I worked with were usually someone's husband or a family member. And then in November, I went to Maui for some healing from my psychic girlfriend. And I was laying on her massage table while she was working on me. And she said, Karina, it's time that you start working with more men. They need you. And it was on that trip that I made the decision to finally tell my guides that I was ready. I accepted my new mission to help not only the females, but finally the males. And I swear, as soon as I said yes, I've had so many men reach out to me for help. And it wasn't long after that Angela's husband decided to do the all male group reading. So for the last couple of weeks, I have been dying to share how that day went. It was an absolute first for me. And although I almost canceled many times, I actually went through with it. So today I thought it would be fun to bring Angela back on the podcast to help me share that day with all of you. So everyone, please help me welcome back Angela. Ange, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me back.
I'm actually so glad you came back on because I have been dying for weeks to talk about this with everybody. I think I was so nervous about this group reading for months. Do you know how many times I almost canceled with you? Honestly.
I know. I'm surprised you didn't.
Were you?
Good job.
Thanks. I only did it because I think I felt really obligated because you said, no, he wants to do this. And I'm like, okay, I guess I didn't want to let anyone down. And I just remember for honestly, probably about 2 months thinking, I can't do this. I can't do this. Okay. And then I talk myself into it like, yes, I can do this. And then I would panic at the last minute because men are usually so skeptical and closed off. And sometimes I find that really intimidating. So if they're sent to me for, a one-on-one session, that's different. But a group setting is extremely intimidating.
Mm-hmm. But I knew my husband and I had sat together and kind of went over the guys that we thought would be a good fit for the group. And I knew that it would be fine and that they were all, not the types just to kind of sit there and cross their arms and stare you down. Like they were very open to it. So yeah. I knew it was going to be okay. I get it.
Right. Like, and when your husband had said it to me that night at your last group reading, because that's what happened after your last group reading, he said, well, I want to do that. I honestly thought he was joking. And I know you thought he was joking until the next day.
Yeah.
And then you were like, no, he's serious. He wants a date and you've got to do this. And I thought, this isn't good. And I'm not going to say I didn't. I had a lot of anxiety about it because I thought, how can I do this with all these guys, especially for your husband and his friends? Like that's even more intimidating. I think it would be easier if it was a group that I didn't know at all. Right. And I didn't know all of them except for Jay, really, but it was knowing that, you guys all knew these people. It was, I don't know, it was just terrifying. I'm not going to say it wasn't, it was terrifying. And I even said to you, I was like, can you stay, and you're like, no, I forget what you said to me, but you were like, no, Jay said that he didn't get to stay at the last one. So you weren't allowed.
Yeah. Because on ours, I make him take the kids and we for the group part of it. So yeah, and I mentioned to him like, well, I think like Karina wants me to stay. And he's like, well, no, I always have to leave. And I'm like, yeah, well, she feels uncomfortable. So I'm staying. And then he was just kind of like, okay. So I think my sister took the kids and yeah, so I decided that I wanted to stay. And I mean, I'm curious and I wanted to see how it was going to go too. So,
and I didn't even know you were going to stay. So that day I was getting ready and I'm talking myself into this, like, I can do this. Spirit sent them to me. I have to get through this. And even in the car ride on the way up, I was like, okay, talking myself into it. I can do this. And on the car ride, I actually ended up hearing that someone's father was going to be with me and he was so strong. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Someone's coming already. This is going to be good. I pull up in front of your house and I'm like, can I cancel now? Is it too late? And you're like, no, come on in. And I walked in and I'm like, okay, you're here. That's great. And you said, no, I'm going to stay. I'm like, instant breath. Like I just felt not relaxed fully, but it was like, thank God you're going to stay with me because I didn't want to do it alone. It was great.
Yeah. And I was excited just to kind of see how it was going to go too.
And so they all started, I think they were all in the garage and you and I were talking inside. And of course, I'm clearing the space, trying to prep for it. And they all started to walk in. And I remember their faces like, oh, okay, we're doing this. Yep, she's here. And I was trying to shake off my nerves because I'm like, okay, I can't go into this with that much, anxiety or I'm not going to see clearly. And as soon as everybody kind of got seated and you sat beside me, I was like, I honestly was grateful that you were there because I thought, okay, at least I've got her here. I don't feel as scared. I can do this. And I remember I think they asked me some questions in the beginning too, because I asked them if they had anything they wanted to know. And
yeah. And I also gave them the kind of, well, before you even got there, I was giving them the rundown of, how it's like supposed to go. And I'm like, and you're not allowed, you can't just be sitting here and drinking lots and don't interrupt her. And I felt like a mom, like just telling them all the rules.
That's
and
awesome.
like, just sit there. And if you think it's for you, then you need to speak up. And
that's so awesome. I didn't know you did that. That's great.
Yeah.
So they already had the little bit of preparation then. That's awesome because when they sat down, some of them asked me some interesting questions. And I thought, okay, well, I'll answer what I can and then let's go to work. And I could see that they were all really uncomfortable. Do you remember like some of them were sitting there with their hands, they've got their hands like clasped tight together, just like their knuckles are getting white. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, so they're just as scared as I am. Okay, we're good. I can do this.
Yeah.
And I remember at first when I like started, I was like, okay, look, I've got someone's father with me. And I know your husband piped in and said, oh, I think it's this guy. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not sure if that's who it's for.
Oh, yeah. And I had told you before, which I was like, everyone is so great and this is going to be so good and you have nothing to worry about. And then that part had happened. And then, well, when my husband said something, I looked at him and I was like, oh my God, you're not supposed to say anything. Like,
didn't I tell
so then
you?
I'm like staring at him, like getting mad at him. He's like, what? I'm like, you're not supposed to say anything. And then it wasn't, then the person it was for all of a sudden, which I wasn't even expecting, was like, nope, nope. Yeah, that's me, but we're not doing this. And I was like,
oh my God.
And I actually thought he was joking. And
so did I.
Like, okay, so your dad, he's like, not here. I was like, okay, he's not kidding.
He's like,
so then I just felt like, oh God, I felt sort of like, oh, sorry. I did tell you they were all really like nothing to worry about. You're all good. And the first person was, nope, not going there. So I'm like, okay.
We start off the group like that. I'm like, oh, okay, so we're not doing this. Like, it was weird.
Yeah.
But I understood it.
I think it was unexpected because I think a lot of them didn't think, I don't think they knew what to expect, but when it was actually like for them, it was, oh, okay, well, I can't do this and I can't do this. So I was a little surprised, but it's still good about it. I was just a little taken aback. I think like the very first one you say, and it's like, no, we're not talking about it.
Not talking about it. I'm not going there. And I was too, because I sat there and I went, oh no, like, and it was because that father had been in the car with me while I was driving up and I knew he wanted to communicate with his son. So when I started to describe, certain things, he knew who it was. He knew it was his dad. And he just instantly went into fear and said, no, not here. Well, and I said, okay, that's okay. I can tell him to go away, but we'll do this in private later. Cause I was doing the little mini privates after the group. And he was like, okay. And he was nodding at me, but I was like sitting there going, uh-oh, now what? So I had to like take this father, push him away and say, all right, we're going to move on. And I could feel in that moment too, everybody tense up because they're like, oh God, she's going to call on me. Like, don't call on me. Don't call on me. That's what I was getting. I'm like, well, I can't help it. I got to see who's here. I think from there, I was taken on a journey, if I'm not mistaken, to that one guy's house from his childhood. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and he was there. That one I was not expecting at all because he was very into it and very, I'm with you. Like I like, I can see what you're seeing. And
I know.
yeah, that was weird.
It was so fascinating for me because I was in this house, I'm describing it, and he looks at me, he goes, I know where you are. That's my childhood home. And I said, well, you go around this corner. There's this like, weird little door to go in. He goes, that's the door I never went into. And he kept saying it. And he goes, is it really weird that when you're describing this and you're saying this, I'm seeing exactly what you see and I'm there with you? And I'm like, no, it's not weird. I looked at him and I'm like, you are extremely intuitive. You always have been. And he's like, I really have. And then after he told me, he's like, I hope that guys don't think that I'm weird or whatever. And I'm like, no, this is something it's who you are and you have it. So it was kind of neat for me to have someone
Yeah.
join me, and nobody's ever really done that.
And the
as I
guys,
was
they just
learning.
wanted to know what was behind the door.
That's
That's all. They
right.
were like, so what's behind the door?
I'm like, I
Never got
can't
to
get
know what was
in.
behind the door.
None of us could get in. Like Ira, sorry, the other guy and I couldn't
Yeah.
get into the door. We were just stuck at it. And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, it's okay. We're just there. And it was his loved ones that were coming in to give him some really wonderful advice about his life. And sometimes they'll
Mhm.
take me on a journey like that to a specific place so that the person won't doubt that it's their loved one. And
Right.
he knew, he was right into it. He got the messages he needed, may not have wanted, but needed. And I think he really enjoyed that part, like the group session. And then obviously our private was incredible too. And then from there, I just remember we were kind of jumping around. It was like so many people were coming at me. And,
Mhm.
I want to tell everybody this because I thought it was interesting. But within the first probably couple of minutes, maybe, I looked around and I just saw everybody choking up. And I'm like, there's a whole room of grown men all of a sudden crying, and we haven't even really started. What's happening here?
Mhm.
It was pretty powerful, really. I guess it was fascinating and powerful. And I thought, okay, well, we're going to keep going. And then there were certain things that were coming up. And you know me, I'm very direct when I do readings.
Yeah.
It's not what you want to hear, it's what you need to hear. And then one of the things that really stood out to me was there was one particular guy sitting directly across from me, and he had his arms crossed and he was kind of looking nervous and stuff, but I felt more so that he wasn't nervous, more so that he was not necessarily wanting to be there.
Mhm.
And out of nowhere, I remember just getting the worst pains in my head. And I'm like, okay, look, there's someone here. I actually don't know who it is right now, but I'm just feeling their physical pain. So I said it was like some sort of accident, not a car accident, but I felt like my head was being not even squished, but like an impact to the head where it was so strong that my
Mhm.
whole head was just throbbing. And nobody's saying anything. And I'm like, okay, like if I don't understand something, I'll usually say I'll pass and let it go. And this person would not leave me. I couldn't shake this feeling inch. Like I was looking at you and I'm like, my head's killing me. I don't even know what this is. And nobody's saying anything. Everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy at this point. And then very quietly, the guy in front of me says, I'm pretty sure I know who that is. And I'm like, okay, well, did they have this and this and this happen? And he's like, yes. And he said, I think it's, my cousin that has passed, and she had had a very traumatic accident. And I just looked at him and I said, okay. And then as soon as he acknowledged it, the pain in my head went away. And then I was
Mhm.
able just to channel her. And I started to describe certain things about the accident that he looked at me and he said, nobody could possibly know that. And he just started sobbing. And I was like, then all
Mhm.
the other guys are crying, everybody's crying with him. And
Yeah. I got a little
oh,
teary eyed at that moment because I wasn't expecting, well, I mean, because they're guys, so you don't expect them really to kind of break down like that. And I was like,
no.
oh my goodness. And I kind of did. And then I know the other guy that was sitting there, they're good friends. And I know when you had said, that part that no one would have known, he even kind of just was like, oh my God, like just
Yeah.
totally taken aback that you knew that.
Mhm.
And then he started getting upset, just like crying, like just because it was just no one expected that. And I think at that moment it got really real with
Mhm.
all of them. Like, okay, she knows what she's like. This is like this is a real thing, and
Yep.
she's very good. She knows what she's doing. And I do feel like it kind of changed the feeling in the room, not necessarily in a bad way, just a they kind of got a little bit more serious and are like, okay.
A
And
lot more
then the one
emotional.
guy, totally more emotional, and the one guy that I think like he was excited to be there, but I don't think he fully, I don't even want to say believed in it. He was just kind of, because he was really chatty at first. He talked a lot. And
Yep.
to the point where, if you remember, I was like, hey, you need to be quiet. Like, stop talking. Gotta
Do
move on.
remember.
And then
Yes.
after that moment, though, he like just kind of shut down and got quiet, sat there, and almost like it was like, oh, don't. I hope she doesn't talk to me. Oh, and anytime you could be like wanting to move on, he would just look down. Almost like, when you're you don't want the teacher to call on you in class and you're
Yep.
just like, please don't look at me.
That's right.
So I think that did become real for everybody after that moment.
And at that point, I think after we had done that particular person coming through, that's when we took a break and everybody went out to the garage. And I don't even remember what I did. I remember just kind of walking around. I think I went to the bathroom, tried to shake that off because it was quite heavy.
Yeah. And I think because I had gone out there and they were all kind of just like talking like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she knew that. And I was like, oh, so it's good so far. And they're like, they thought it was crazy. They're just like, yeah, like that's crazy. I can't believe that. And so, yeah, I think it definitely hit home kind of for a few of them anyway after that one. And yeah, then after the break, getting back in, I think that we moved on to, or you were trying to move on, but there was another person that was kind of across from you that was giving, like, wasn't even letting you
read them
like at all. Like,
nope.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And I could feel it. And it was interesting because I was just like, if you just
let go,
open up a little bit, just let it happen. But he was like, nope.
Not getting in there.
If you go over there and you'd ask him a question, he's like, no, not me. I don't know. Like, he was just very, yeah, it was very, yeah, totally. But then I know you had said, but then the one beside him was open to it, but it was kind of like their energies were, I don't know if it was kind of like getting mixed up and I almost wish I could go back and separate them, because I think that the two, because they are really good friends. And I think having like the two of them sit beside each other was almost causing like, like when
like
you're
a block.
it was just,
you're picking up each other's stuff. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I was glad we were doing the privates after, because then I got a chance to talk to the one that was really open, and he needed it so much. Like he really needed to hear some personal messages just for him. And I think that his messages didn't come out until the private, because I think he was terrified that they would.
I think they all were, probably, and especially after that one kind of revelation earlier on.
Well, I think they did panic.
Well, and then when he came upstairs, he had said, because I was asking everyone, I'm like, how did it go? Tell me. And he had come upstairs and said, well, if I didn't believe before, I sure do now. And he's like, I got emotional, and I really needed that.
And I think whenever I do groups, there's always at least one, usually one only, but that will either block me or they're extremely skeptical and stuff. And I think, okay, well, it's always those ones that need it the most, really. And that one in particular was hard to break. He had a full wall up with me. And even when we went into privates, I looked at him and I said, I can't read you. You won't let me in. And he said, well, I'm open to it. And I said, but I can't get in there. I feel like you've got a guard up, and I can't break that down unless they want to. And all the other guys that came into the privates, especially, it was incredible. They sat down, they let go. Almost all of them were crying again. There were a lot of tears that night. I can't even imagine one guy crying like that, let alone 8. There was so many tears, and it was beautiful. It was magical, and they really needed it. And I think it took some of them a little bit longer to trust me.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, like, the one that I said kind of had shut down after the chatty one.
Yep.
He didn't want to do the reading, or the one-on-one with you.
Yeah.
He was like, no, I'm not going to go. I'm good. I don't need it. I don't want to go. And we were all like, you're going to get it done. That's why you're here for a reason. You're not skipping out on it.
Mhm.
And plus you still have to pay her, so you might as well go get it done. Just kidding.
Yeah.
So he would not, like, I think he was one of the last ones to go to, because he kept putting it off, like,
He was.
I don't
Yep.
need it, I don't need it. And no, so finally we're just like, just go. And I don't know, he didn't actually say much once he came out for me. He's like, yeah, I mean, it was good. Yeah, it was, just I think it was good. He just didn't want
To
to
share.
come up and to share, really, which is fine. Not like you have to share anything. But yeah, no, I think they were all good. And it's like I said, you always have that one that kind of blocks. But
Yep. And that
I think,
happens. Everybody else that was there, they really needed it and they got what they needed, I believe. And when women come up and they are the first ones after a group wanting to share and talk about it, and the guys, yes, really personal things come up in our privates, and they are the kind of people that just shut it off and like they don't want to talk about it and they don't want to share because it's personal. And so I think even that guy coming up and like, no, it's fine, I think it's deflecting, right? It's like, I don't want anyone to look at my stuff, right? Because nobody ever
mhm,
wants to admit that they have things that need to necessarily be worked on or that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
mhm. Yeah, we were kind of bugging him after. We're like, what deep dark secrets did she find out about you? Is that why you don't want to tell us?
That's right.
Just
That's
kidding.
right.
But that group was good too, because I did feel like there was a lot of laughs too, right? It wasn't
Oh,
super serious the
yeah.
whole time. Like, they were all enjoying each other and just everything that was happening. And so it wasn't super heavy the whole time. Like, there was a lot of laughter, which,
That
I
was my
mean, I was
favorite
like,
part.
okay, stop laughing, guys. Like,
That's
let's move
right.
on. Because I was like, oh my God, just stop talking. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm just used to, because
It being
girls are
so,
totally different. Like, we're
well,
very
yeah,
focused,
very.
and we are like, okay. But the guys were just like, blah, 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 and laughing. And then they would go completely off topic and start talking about something else. And then the one that is super intuitive, he was like, I'm going to tell you guys a story about this one time. And I'm like, oh my God, like, this is not how it's supposed to go.
I
But it
know.
went, yeah, it was, they
And
needed to do that.
because I remember looking at you at one point, you looked at me like shaking your head, like, I'm sorry, they're laughing. I said, no, no, it's okay. I said, this is what they need. They need to almost, because it was so interesting. They would all cry. Everybody was crying and getting like choked up. And then it was like laughter and they were goofing off. And then they'd go back into serious stuff and cry again. Like it was just what was needed, I think. Because if they didn't have that laughter, I'm not sure they would have enjoyed the day because it was heavy. There was a
Mhm.
lot that came out that was heavy and a lot of emotions. And I noticed though, after we did the privates and I would come up for a little break and look at the guys, and they did feel so much lighter. Like they got so much off their chests,
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
remember your husband, I couldn't even look at him while I was doing the group because every time I'd look at him, his eyes seemed to like look like they were tearing up. And I'm like, uh-oh,
Mhm.
I don't know what's going on here, but I don't know if I can look at him. And I wasn't
Mhm.
expecting him to come into the privates. And then I think when I came up last, I'm like, is anyone left? Are we almost done? And you're like, no, Jay needs to come. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's go.
Mhm. Yeah, he didn't want to. He was just like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm like, nah, I really think out of anybody, you need to do this,
Hmm.
because it was I guess, your idea to do the group. And just how, like, from the last time we talked, like, how far he had come with everything about it, right?
Yeah.
And I just knew he needed to do it. I'm like, you need to do it. And I think that's why you wanted to do the group, because you want a reading for yourself. So I knew that he needed to get it done, and he decided, okay, I'll just go do it. So he went downstairs, and an hour later, because
More
your
than an
readings are,
hour. Yeah.
usually not that long. And I'm like, oh, what is going on down there? Like, I was just surprised, because I didn't know if you were doing the talking or if he was, because he's pretty quiet. So I wasn't
Yeah.
sure how it was going, but I'm like, well, it must be going well. I mean, they've been down there. Then another 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, okay, like, what's,
Hmm.
wow, he must really unloaded, or I don't know. I didn't even know what to think.
Right.
So then when he came upstairs, he like looked a little teary-eyed. I wasn't sure, and I was kidding. And I'm like, oh my God, were you crying? And then he just looked at me, and I'm like, oh,
Ooh.
you were. oh my gosh,
No.
sorry. And I'm like, oh God, what did she say? And
Oh,
he would not, he's like, just like, he wouldn't even tell me. He's just like, nah, nothing, all good, whatever. And then you came upstairs and you were exhausted.
yeah.
And I felt so bad. But I just,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
like
good.
Jay would not, you left right away. I think you were just like, I'm done. I have to go home,
Yeah.
get
Yes, I
some
did.
sleep. And so then I'm like, so I think we stayed up for probably another hour and I'm trying to get it out of him. I'm like, tell me. And he's like, no. I'm like, oh my God, if you don't tell me, I'm never talking to you again. Like, you need to tell me what, like, you were down there the longest out of everybody. And
What
like you were
happened? Yeah.
crying. Like, who
Yes.
cries? And, I was telling you the other day, I was like, we've had a few counseling sessions like last year. And, that's what I wanted him to do then. I wanted him to cry. I wanted him to cry in the counseling. And he just sits there and just like crosses his arms. I'm like, and now he cries? I was like, he must have done a really good job. So he said, so he's like, I'm exhausted. Like, I have to go to bed. So
Mhm.
all night, I had no idea what had happened or what he said. So finally in the morning, like, I need to know, like, this is killing me. And
Oh,
he just said, honestly, it was a huge therapy session. And I don't know why I cried. Like, I couldn't stop crying. I don't even know why. Like, it was just like lots of things
oh.
came up and he's like, I don't know. I couldn't stop. I couldn't help it. So I was like, oh, good
It's
thing we spent the money on the counselor. We could have just used Karina.
That's right. It was like, honestly, a floodgate. The poor guy, a floodgate had opened, and he would look at me, and I'm like, okay. He would gather himself, and I'm like, okay, we're done, right? So I, I thought we were done, and then all of a sudden, he would just start crying again. I was like, oh, I think he had a lot of stress built up, and he just unleashed. And sometimes that
Mm-hmm.
happens. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he had said the same thing. He said, Karina, I don't know, because he came to see me like, I think maybe 2 years ago. And he sat down in
Mm-hmm.
my room and he goes, I don't even know what happened. 30 seconds in, I sit down in your chair and I'm bawling like a baby. He said, I don't even know what happened. I'm like, that's sometimes what happens with, being a healer when they are around me in a private manner like that, right? Like in a session, people just everything that's been
Mm-hmm.
stuck in there and bottled up, or that they don't talk about, or they don't even feel, just comes pouring out. And once that floodgate opens, you can't really shut it off right away. So that's why we were down there for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew he needed it. And I was like, okay, now I understand why he even went ahead and booked the group reading. At first, I thought it was like, oh, well, I want to see what this is all about. Let's have some fun with it. But when I realized that those men that showed up that night really needed it, it was something that
Mm-hmm.
spirit decided that, hey, look, these guys are going to joke about it, but they need it the most. And look what happened. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
And
so
even
glad we
now,
did
like,
it.
I noticed that, or since then, that my husband's, he's just not, I guess, not as stressed. He seems lighter.
I love
Yeah,
that.
like, I think it was really good for him. I think he needed to hear everything that you had to say. And obviously, even if I said the same thing too, sometimes coming from someone else is just more validation. And
It is. And I
um,
think it's important to hear it from someone who is neutral, who's not
mhm,
involved in a marriage or in a couple or whatever. Like, I just am very direct. This is the stuff that you
mhm.
need to work on. This is what's going on. Let's do this to fix it.
I think even hearing that and with everything that is going on, he was kind of like, oh, okay. And taking whatever you said and just applying it. And he's just seems better.
That's
Like,
fantastic.
I'm not even sure how to explain it, but you could just tell he's like, he can breathe, like he's calm, like it's okay, like he can take a breath and not stress so much, even with everything that
Going
is
on.
going on.
Hmm.
He seems okay about it.
I love
So
that.
yeah, I mean, I do. And he even said, he's like, it was awesome. Every single one of the guys thought it was great. They were like, I needed that. It was such a great time and very draining. They were all exhausted,
Yeah.
but I know some of them were like, I have to go. Like, after they had come up from their private readings, they're like, hey, great, like, I'm leaving. I'm I have to go to bed. I'm
I'm
exhausted.
done. Yes.
Yeah. So no, and even the feedback the next day was just, yeah, it was great. So anyone that, has ever hesitated to bring their husband or maybe do a guy group reading, they should do it.
I think so too. I think that it's, again, in the 8 years that I've been doing groups, I've had maybe a couple of guys stay for the session only because their wives are like, you need to come to this, but not because a whole group of men decide that they want to get some healing done, because I think it's almost embarrassing for them, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're so conditioned to be strong and not closed off, but just I think strong, right? Like hold back.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened that night was beautiful. Actually, it was really
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. It was amazing for me to sit back and go, okay, to watch a bunch of grown men open up, cry it out, and be emotional and vulnerable. That's what I think the world needs right now, is for everyone to just open up and not keep things bottled up. So I do hope a lot more men decide to do this. And I will say this, ever since that group reading with you guys with the men, I've had some clients message me that are men, quite a few of them, saying, I heard about you through a friend and can I book an appointment? I'm like, it's from that night. It's their
It has
friends.
to be.
It has to be. So I find it really fascinating. That tells me that whatever shifted that night, whatever their belief was before, I feel like they get it now. And you
Mm-hmm.
can't deny it. You can't make this shit up. You just can't. And I think that's what they saw and witnessed. And I think it changed a lot of how they viewed mediums.
Oh, 100%. And I think that they would do it again, honestly.
I think
Or
some of
even
them would.
come just for another reading just with you, on
True.
their own. I think they would do that.
There's apparently a couple of them that are going to be doing that. So I thought that's pretty special. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. And maybe next time we do a big group where it's the actual wives and the husbands at that one, and see if they are as vulnerable that time or not. They might shut off, who knows, but at least they did it that day and they let go with you sitting there. So that says a lot, right? I think that was amazing.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how they were going to feel about me being there, but then I thought, whatever, you guys, like, I don't know. It's different with girls because you have your girlfriends and you kind of know, your friends' backstories, or, you just know more about each other. I had no idea. So anything I had no idea, like what you were talking about, or I couldn't even help where it with friends. I'm like, I think that's you. Oh, that might be you.
Yeah, you couldn't have known.
So I think it was kind of tense at first. And then I think just with like everyone kind of joking around and just getting kind of more used to being there, it got better. And then it got emotional. And then, yeah, I just think it was very up and down, but in a good way.
I think so too. I'm so glad we did it. I'm actually not going to lie. I'm so glad it's over. I was like, oh, it's like a breathe out, because I just wasn't sure what to expect, I guess. And I was dreading it. And I am glad I didn't cancel. I realized that this was happening for a reason and I had to suck it up and just do my job. And I'm glad that it went so well. I really am glad that it went so well. And I really am looking forward to now working with more males, because I think I've pushed them away for so long. And I also believe that that's why I have two boys, because I would love to raise men that are open and emotional and vulnerable. And I think that's important for so many of the guys out there, in the world right now. And I can't wait to help them all open up and not keep things bottled up, because I don't want anyone holding back and holding all these things in. Like, look at Jay. I think sometimes having someone just sit and listen and give spiritual advice from up above can really just change so much. And I look at where he's come from the first day I met him. And if anybody doesn't remember our story, you can listen to our other episode called A Fun Chat with a Friend, because we explain how her husband was so skeptical of this and not understanding. And now he's, sitting with me and allowing himself to really just let go and breathe and heal. And that was so beautiful for me to witness. So I'm so glad it happened.
Hopefully we can do another one soon.
Yeah, you tell me. I'm in. I'm not as scared now. I promise. Now that I've done that one, I'm like, okay, I got this. I could do it. I'm not gonna
Good.
freak out again. So thanks for staying with me and giving me that, like, I don't know, strength, because I think I would have panicked if you left. I would have been like, no, don't go. Just stay with me. So it worked out just as it should have. So that was awesome.
Mhm.
So I want to leave you all with this today. It is time for us to help men to be vulnerable, to show their pain and their sadness. They need to be encouraged to open up and let it all out. I've been gifted with a husband who isn't afraid to express his emotions. In fact, that's the very thing that I found endearing about him. I also believe that I've been gifted two boys in this lifetime because I'm supposed to help raise them to be kind, open, and loving humans. And I'm so grateful that they are. I am also grateful that I have finally found the courage and strength to finally help a lot of males in the world. I'm ready and looking forward to it. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us today on the Divine Messages podcast. And Angela, thank you once again for coming back on here with me.
Thanks for having me.
So glad we'll do it again. If you would like to book a reading with me, I can be reached at www.divinemessages.ca or on Instagram at Divine Messages 333 or at the Divine Messages podcast, as well as on Facebook under Divine Messages or the Divine Messages podcast. Please bear in mind that the perspectives and opinions represented in this podcast are based solely on the Divine Messages interpretations. We can in no way be held responsible for the actions of our followers.